First of all, apologies. I will be doing this in English as I really don't. I love your language, and I just listened. Those guys did a fantastic job with helping me understand what happened before. So, first of all, good morning, everybody. Now, I'm probably going to ruin this, but I'm going to have a go at saying this. So, this is Sistok yo napo. That was supposed to be my Hungarian good hello. Now, Zoltan, where's Zoltan? I'm going to try not to ruin this for you. Buna Dimanusa? Not really? No? Okay. Do Bia Dan. Better? And then Dobra Den. I think that one is fairly good, right? So anyway, I gave it a go. Look, today is an opportunity for you to obviously not just listen to people like myself and to Kate and to Tanya, but also to talk to each other, because I think there's a lot of expertise and experience in this room. And I think during the breaks and during the conversations you have, you really do need to make use of that. And if there's people in this room who you, there'll be a lot of people in this room who will know a lot of stuff, and also I don't know what I don't know. Does that make sense about what happens in Hungary and Romania and Slovenia and Slovakia? I don't know, and so there's people here who do know. So make sure you do that. It's a pleasure to be here. Kate is responsible for, I guess, having me come here today. So if it doesn't work well, you go and see Kate or Tanya, and obviously a lot of organisations got into this. I'm a parent too. I was a teacher for many years, and I was a head teacher of a special school. And the special school was set up in London for students that had learning and behaviour difficulties, and that's why I got into this area. So essentially, I've been involved in it now for a number of years, and I was interested to hear, the talk we had by Dr. I'm going to get the name right again. I'll probably ruin this again. Dr. Laszlo, about how you're still going through a journey here, I think, in this part of the world, as we all do, in trying to understand and make sense, and even accept terms which some people think are excuses, and some people think are, you're basically using this term in order to sort of like explain away the parents or the food or computer stuff. I think reality is that we will go through this journey. Dyslexia for many years in the UK was seen very much as an excuse. It was seen as people justifying why their children weren't working or weren't reading. And people aren't saying that anymore. And ADHD is on a bit of a journey, I think, in that area. There's still a lot of people who think that it is just an excuse and it's not an explanation. But I think if you take the opportunity to maybe try and have a little think about how the child sees the world, then I think you might well understand and why they do what they do in situations that they do. And the example that Zusa just showed a minute ago about someone moving on a chair and putting something across the bottom there so they could do that is an excellent example of what you can come up with when you think that there's a reason for doing it. Does that make sense? If you just say, sit still, then, for some individuals that will work, but for other individuals, you can say sit still 1,000 times and it still won't work. So you have to do something about it. Does that make sense, really? And I think ADHD goes through a bit of a cycle like that. So what I'm going to try and do in this presentation is to give you something to think about in terms of how you might want to see their world. The guys have got all the practical solutions for you, and they're going to be talking to you about that. And I'm going to try and give you some perspective in how those things might and should work. But the example you gave on the chair is a good example of what you can come up with when you think that there's a difference to be made. Does that make sense, really? If you do the same things you've always done with everyone else, it's probably not going to work. So you do have to be thinking a bit more creatively. Now, I've got to be honest that this age group, the 3 to 6s, is not my area of expertise. I generally work with the older students, the ones who have essentially been a bit battered and bruised by the sort of responses they've received, both from families and also sometimes, not by the parents, but maybe sometimes by the people who judge the parents. And also at schools as well, where people aren't quite understanding why he or she is different, and the attitude is that he or she is ruining the chances of everybody else. And, you know, there is a perspective there that we need to be looking at the group and the needs of the group, but we need to be looking at the needs of the individual. And as a term I came up with some years ago, sorry, I didn't come up with, I heard many years ago by a colleague of mine, and he said that fairness isn't treating everyone the same, it's giving them what they need. And that is true. Some people need different things than other people. Some people here are wearing glasses. That's fair, isn't it, that you wear a pair of glasses? It's not unfair because you haven't got a pair of glasses. You need a pair of glasses because you need to, you know, interpret the world and you need a tool to do that. So that's why it's fair to give someone something to bounce on if they need it, because that's fair, right? So if we get into that mindset about that, then I think we are partly there. Now, as I said, I am normally working with teenagers, and why it's really a privilege to come here today is because many of the teenagers that I work with have many layers. They have many other things that have built up over the years. There's a term that we use in the UK and in the US particularly about more, how can I put it, aggressive behaviour. It's called oppositional defiant disorder, or ODD. Now, ODD doesn't come on its own. It comes as a result of frustrations with other issues not being dealt about. Does that make sense, really? And if you are, by the way, living with a teenager, is anyone here living with teenagers? Can you put your hands up if you're living with teenagers? Yeah? Living with teenagers? I live with 3, okay? And what's getting me through this phase is an American writer called Mark Twain. Have you ever come across him? Because Mark Twain said, when I was 14, I thought my parents knew nothing. But when I got to 21, I was surprised how much they'd learned in 7 years. So if that is working for you, but the thing about that's traditional teenagers. But if you're a teenager that's being battered and bruised by the system and told off all the time and told you can't and you're this and you're that, then how much more difficult is it going to be for that person to keep it all in and to a certain extent to live with? I mean, I get that too. So that's the area. So if we can get in early, we can prevent the layers, the frustrations from building up, then that surely is the best route, really. Now, also, I have 3 children. I will talk to you a bit about that. They're older now, but they were at one point, we had 3 under 2, because we had a daughter, and then we had a second one, and we got a 2-for-1 deal. We had twins, so I will talk to you. But we have a new baby in our house, and our new baby is gorgeous, and I am smitten. I am smitten, and I miss her dearly. Do you want to see a picture of her? You want to see a picture of my new baby? There she is. She is a Cocker Spaniel. Now, we had a Springer Spaniel before. I'm not sure if that's translatable, but they are quite bouncy dogs. This is a Cocker Spaniel. This is the most hyperactive dog in the world, okay? She is only 8, she's 8 months now. That's when she was about 2 months. She's not sure whether she's a dog or a baby bear, but she is lovely. But the thing about this is when we had the other dog, the Springer Spaniel, can I tell you, we were on it because we had young children and we were like, no, no, not on the sofa. Not on the sofa. So we taught her, and we were both, myself and my wife, were both on it. And so she never got on the sofa because we were parents. Now, oh, it's okay, because when the dog got older, the other dog got older, she was allowed on the sofa. So now my wife is saying, oh, Riley, that's her name, you can come on the sofa. This is not good for Riley or for us, because you know what we are right now? We are not parents, we are grandparents. And that is not helping Riley, okay? But I'm going to come back to that in a minute, because basically you do sow what you reap. You know, if you want to get progress, it isn't inspiration, it is perspiration, okay? And I want to talk to you about the importance of rules and rituals and consistency, because that's what we all need. And actually, although children or people who have ADHD fight structure, they really need it. In fact, they need it more than anybody. They need it. So anyway, we'll take you on a bit of a journey. The area today that we tend to focus on a lot with ADHD is behavior. But it isn't just about behavior. It is about learning, and it's about socialization. It's about, you know, understanding the group dynamic. And there's some people, obviously, who seem to get that earlier than others. So we're going to talk to you about those three areas, not just about behavior, about learning and about socialization. By the way, these are really good pens. We were talking about them. They can show you wherever you are, and they're really, really good if you've got a cat. I don't know if you do cats, because they're really good, because the cats run after them, and they just chase them and stuff. If you've had a long, busy day, you can get one of these and run it up the leg of somebody, and it can whack them. So it's just something to get you through the day. So what we're going to do is talk about children today. So I thought I'd show you a couple of children, just to make the point that, you know, I've been a parent of young children, and it's making it up as you go along. And there are our boys when they were 3. Okay, they're twins, as you can see, and also when you're a parent, when I was a teacher initially, if young people were a bit different, I probably used to think the reason why that was because it was something that the parents haven't done. Does that make sense, really? So I think there was something really about the family. It wasn't in the child, it was the family. Does that make sense, really? But then as I went through my career, I started to change my mind, because you got some kids who were coming from families, the same families, and they were very different. So you were thinking, well, it's not something the family's not doing, it's something in the child. And then I completely had my Damascus moment when I had my own. Because you see this one here? He's Brennan. Now, Brennan is pretty straightforward. He's pretty easy to get on with. But his brother, Connor, is not. and so, therefore, and they came at the same time. Does that make sense? They came at the same time. So we tried to do the same things, but the same things that worked for him did not work for him. And it's very different. And by the way, twins are interesting because people have issues about twins. Like, for example, is anyone here a parent of twins? Anyone got twins? Anyone a parent of twins? Yeah. Have you got boys, girls? Is it boy and a girl? Classic, boy and a girl. Do you see these boys? Do you see them? They are quite, they're obviously the same height-ish, but you see they're different. He's got very ginger hair, and he's got quite blonde hair. And that's always been the case. When we were younger and you walk in the pushchair or stroller or whatever it might be, people stop you and they say, you don't get stopped with other children, but with twins, you're stopped. And people say, are they twins? And you say, yes. They look at them and they say, are they identical? And you say, no, one's got ginger hair, the other one's got blonde hair, okay? You have a boy-girl twin. How many times have people stopped you and said, are they twins? Yes. Are they identical? No, one's a girl, one's a boy. And then people stop you and they say to you, oh, my neighbour, she's got a friend in Australia and she's got twins. Like, I don't care, is the really. Or they'll say to you, my wife has been asked one time, did you have them naturally? Like, Do we know you? Are you friends of the family? The only good thing about having twins is you get a self-support group, and it helps you to sort of understand that your life is not really that stressful, because you go to the multiple births Christmas party and you go there and you see the people who have twins and quads, and you come home and you feel just fine, I can tell you, really. But the point about it is, it's a journey being a parent, and it's a journey being a teacher and a parent and someone in my field, because we do kind of look at them a bit too much. And those of you who do this for a living will possibly do that too. But it's about understanding the rhythms, and I think that's one of the things I want to talk to you today about. Children, really. It's not just what you call, and in fact, we use terms, but I would like to focus today a little bit more on traits. Does that make sense, really? Because as I said before, overlap in these things is the norm and not the exception. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a journey on that. So the term itself, I think one of the things that's really important for us to get our heads around is that ADHD is a developmental difference. Or I hate the word disorder, it's a developmental difference, but disorder's in the word. And the one thing I would say, I love the speech we had today, the one thing that I would like to sort of, not change, but just basically have you think about slightly differently, is that there are no such thing as ADHD children, or dyslexic children, or dyspraxic children. In my view, there's children who have dyspraxia. Does that make sense, really? Or children who have some of these traits. I think if we start thinking about a tribe, it's not how it works. It's children or people who have differences. Does that make sense, really? And the key thing here is about the developmental differences in children that fit this criteria. You see, one of the things we do is we group children not based on their abilities or their strengths or weaknesses. We group them based on one main criteria. You know what that is? Their date of manufacture. So we put all the 4-year-olds in a group thinking that they're all 4. Well, they're not. We put all the 5-year-olds group saying they're not. Some of them that's what the birth certificate says, but developmentally they might be like a 2-year-old in some skills and a 7-year-old in others, which is why they stand out, and which is why the group doesn't work for everybody. I mean, I don't know, Miss. What's your name, Miss? Yuli. Nice to meet Yuli. Now, when Yuli goes out, you go out for dinner tonight. You don't go out with all the 32-year-olds, do you? That you know. This isn't working here, is it really? No. Okay. The point is, you go out with people that you like, or people who your colleagues are. You have a group based on your interests and your things. You don't go out with all the people your same age, do you, really? Because that's not how it works. But when you're a child, you don't get that ability, which is why they stand out. Now, if people start understanding developmental, I think they start thinking and judging people differently. You see, can I ask you a question? Who here has either organised or been to a first birthday party? Can you put your hands up? If you've organised or been to a first birthday party, can you put your hands up? Some people have. Kind of like a general observation, there is no point having a first birthday party. Do you know why? I watched my daughter, when she was 1, walk over the heads of all the other children in the room to get to her mother or to the food. It's an excuse to have wine for the parents, isn't it, really? Because that stage, developmentally, they're not aware of the other children in the room. Does that make sense, really? And by the way, those of you who have more than one child, the second child will hold you to account in the future. Because for the first child, you've got thousands of pictures and videos, and for the second one, you've got fewer, right, really? And they'll say, why? Did you not love me as much as them? But anyway, the point about it is, and we had twins, so we've got nothing of them, really. But anyway, the point being that developmentally, and then when kids get to 2, they start sharing and they start playing because that's where they're at. And at 3, they play a bit more. Well, that's fine. They're in a progression. But if you've got traits of ADHD, developmentally, as I said before, he might say it's 6 on his birth certificate, he might be at a 3-year-old level in certain skills and at a 9-year-old in others. Does that make sense, really? When people, that penny drops, so if that term's going to work here, when the penny, then you will start thinking differently about them. People will not judge them in the same way as everyone else. And they'll start coming up with strategies for them. Does that make sense, really? It works that way. The other point to make is the reasons for it, which I'm not going to go in too much today, but there is no doubt there is a neurological facet to this. And that's why taking that on board and accepting that may provide you with some options that you might not first want to take on board, but maybe do in the future. The other thing to say, though, what makes ADHD an interesting area to work in is because if you're working with a child with ADHD, you're often working with a family also that has the traits. Now, this isn't something that we still, I think, accept. We do tend to still think that it's the child and not the family, or sometimes we think it's the family, not the child. Often it's a bit of both. In the US now, what's happening is in certain states, not every state, certain individuals or certain states have taken the point that they will not diagnose or assess the children until they assess the parents. And guess who's going on to the medication first? It's the parents. But when you think about it, it's actually not a bad way round. We have a show called Super Nanny in the UK, which is a nanny that goes in, and who does she work with, the child or the parents? She works with the parents on behalf of the child. Does that make sense, really? Now, it's not every family, but it is going to be quite consistent. Now, if you look at this slide here, this is showing you things that you inherit. So for example, this is height. So you are 90% likely to be the same height as your parents. Did you know that, really? So if you are, what would it be here? What would feet in it? It'd be in kilometres here, wouldn't it? Or kilometres, not kilometres, in metres. Sorry, not kilometres, kilometres. So if you are, what would 6 feet be? 1 metre 70, yeah, 1 metre 7, yeah. So if you are 1 metre 8, 1 metre 8, it's very likely your parents were 1 metre 6, 1 metre 7, that sort of a category. If you are 1 metre 8, you're 90% likely to be the same height as your parents. Did you get that? So 90%. So if 1 metre 8, your parents are likely 175, 1 sort of 6. But if you are 1 metre 8 and both your parents are 1 metre 4, there could be another reason for that situation, really. But the point about it is that it's a very high genetic coefficient, okay? You didn't say I had to take no risks. So basically, it's a very high genetic coefficient. Schizophrenia is up there in the 70s. It's very high schizophrenia. And then asthma's up in the 40s. And I'm sorry to tell you that breast cancer is far too high in the mid-20s, and so we've got to do much more with that. Where's ADHD? It's up there just behind height. 80% likely. That doesn't mean that in every family the parents will have ADHD traits, but it is likely that in 4/5 of the families that you're working with, there's likelihood of it being in the family system. So when you're working with a child with ADHD, you're working, generally speaking, with a family who also may have traits, which is why what you're doing today is so vital to provide the parents with some of those support. Because some of the things that you may feel are obvious, not everybody gets it. Bedtimes, how much food, what the food to. You know, I actually, when we work with families, we start on food. Not because food is the main cause of these traits, but what happens is when families start thinking about food, they start thinking about routines, about bedtime, about how much time on the television, about other things as well. Does that make sense? It gives them traction. They start thinking about aspects of the lifestyle. Does that make sense, really? And also, having a healthy diet isn't a bad thing anyway for somebody who has these traits. So it's working in that field. I think those are, I'm not going to go through all these, but the diagnosis of ADHD is quite complicated. It isn't something that should be done in a half an hour. There are techniques for this which should take place, I believe. But ours take 6 hours. In the school I work in, we do it over 2 days. We see the child twice. We don't want to see the novelty, and we try and eliminate other factors that could be resulting in the traits. The general rule of engagement is you have to exhibit 6 out of 9 of those over a period of 6 months, said to be maladaptive and inconsistent with developmental level. That's crucial, inconsistent with normal developmental level. In 2 or more places, and you're doing something that much more than should be expected of someone of your age and intelligence in comparison to your peers. If you have the ADHD category, you tend to be working in that area there. If you have the inattentive ADD, or we still call it inattentive, it's inattentive presentation now, ADD, then those are 6 out of 9 of those. Now, you see, the hyperactive ones are easy to spot, but it's the inattentive ones that really we've got to also keep an eye on, because they drift through. They drift, particularly when they're younger. You will focus on the ones who are overt. But what about the ones who are covert, who you don't know whether you've really got at all, because you can't see them? They're not obvious. So what have you got to do to make sure they're still with you? Because some of you here may or may not be listening to me. Some of you here are disguising your boredom. See, some of you are a bit bored right now. You've been sitting for a long time, and you think that I think you're listening, but deep down, I know you're not. And what you're doing is you're using the same skill you've always used to avail yourself of responsibility of your true actions. If I look at you searchingly like I'm doing right now, you do, don't you? Yeah. So people are scanning me here, because so I don't know, we've got you. So we're going to do something to make sure you are back. Now, it's a game that I think you will know. I've been told you know. It's called, we call it rock, paper, scissors. I believe you are coup, papier, olo, right? Coup, papier, olo. So what I want you to do is I want you to play coup, papier, olo 6 times with the person beside you in groups of 2. Off you go, rock, paper, scissors. Coup, papier, olo. Off you go with the person beside you. Play best of 6, the person beside you. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Wow, you guys are really good, really compliant. Still works. That countdown works at any level. Even when they're older, you might go 5, 4. It's the power of 3, though. Traffic light system, 1, 2, 3, magic. I'm sure you guys will be bringing that up. Power of 3. Okay, busy slide. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to talk about it too much. You're going to get all the slides, apparently, which are going to come to you. They're going to be downloaded to you. That's just talking about the criteria now with the DSM-5. The big difference really was changing and looking at the age of onset of symptoms going from 7 till 12. It's about 5, 6 years old now. And I'm really pleased about that, because what it did was it was able to therefore look at the covert ones, the inattentive ones, because those symptoms will not be obvious when they're younger. You won't see them. And it's really for girls as well. Girls have been so misunrepresented both in ADHD and in ASD for many, many years. It's been seen as a boy thing. It's really not. It's a boy and girl thing. Yes, there are more boys, but the ratio is about 3 to 1, not 18 to 1. And that's true also with autism or Asperger's in girls. The main reason girls don't get seen in that category because they speak, and because they speak, therefore they haven't got an issue, and they copy, and they fit in socially, and that can work when you're younger, but when you become teenagers, it becomes obvious then. And now we're now seeing girls, particularly in teenage girls, that have anorexia and bulimia, obsessional responses to issues, and now people are saying, oh yeah, they were always a bit like that. Well, why didn't you trigger it when they were younger before we got to this point? And in ADD and ADHD in girls, again, many of these symptoms lie undetected. There's more girls than boys in the subgroup ADD than there is, so it's about 2 to 1, which is a bit unusual in SEN because you name it, the men seem to get it, really. So it's, but it's the ratio is much narrower. What I do for a living now is work mainly in schools and trying to help schools understand different types of young people. And my main job really is working to prevent what we call school exclusion. And what that is children who are sent away from out of school and their life chances are not very good. And many students, I believe, had we addressed the issues early, wouldn't have all these extra layers on them, really. So this is you. And these are your children that you're taking through, on your responsibilities in life, on life's journey. I know, guys, you over here can't see you so much, but I'll come over here and see you now. And what's happening is, but there'll be traps and tribulations on the journey. And unless we do a better job, unless we open our hearts and our Helping Hands project, and unless we get these things through, unless we do that, this could be the outcome. Now, I want you to know that no ducklings were harmed in this presentation. I want you to join me here today in a mission in front of all of your peers and friends. I want you to say these 4 words in whatever language is your preference, but I'm going to tell you what I would like you to say in English. I want you to say loudly and proudly, on the count of 3, no ducklings left behind. Now, to do this, we need to get commitment. So what I want you to do is I want you to link arms with the person beside you. I want you to link arms. You're not going to link arms, or we're not moving on till we do this. We're not moving on. So we've got to link arms with the person beside you. You've got to link, or hold hands. Hold hands with the person beside you. You don't have to, but it's better if you do this. It's a better commitment to the team. And on the count of 3, I do this in schools all over the UK and the world. And in secondary schools, you can imagine the blokes don't want to do this, really. But anyway, we do it. I don't move on. And I want to say loudly and proudly, on the count of 3, no ducklings left behind. Okay? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, that's brilliant. I've never had that in so many different languages, really. But I go to places now and people said, we saved some ducks today. And actually, I saw a video of, it might have been Hungary or it might have been a country where the firemen had rescued a lot of ducklings that had gone down a railing and stuff, and they rescued. Did anyone see that? So, no ducklings left behind. Okay, so the core traits that we're looking at, and I think sometimes because you look at that slide there, it looks really quite overwhelming and confusing and things. I like to talk about the traits these days, not so much about the terms. And the hyperactivity, I know, is in the word, but I don't think that's your core trait. I think that's the one we all talk about, but that's part of them. They're sparky, and we like sparky. We don't like sparky coming into our flame, but we need people who are sparky. I think the areas we need to work on, for me, is the impulsivity and, to a certain extent, the inattention. That's from a learning perspective, and that's from a social perspective and a behavioural perspective. So I think impulsivity, they're all important, but that is really, truly the core one. And when, it was earlier today we were talking about how you define ADHD and versus other issues. And it does become, it's such a difficult and complex area. I tend to look at it this way, in that children with ADHD are, generally speaking, what I call non-premeditated. Does that make sense? The first time they think about what they've done, they've already done it. Does that make sense, really? And that's because the impulsivity, the brain and the body are not in concert, okay? A 1-year-old, At a 1-year-old party, they don't ask someone whether I can have that biscuit. They take it because they want it. But at 2 and 3 and 4, they've now learned that there's a consequence or a response to doing that. Well, children with ADHD aren't getting that at the same level, the same time as their peers. Does that make sense, really? Because there is another word out there that I use to describe behavior, because there are some, we don't use it anymore because we're saying, oh, he or she must have this, but there are some children who are more what I call premeditated. They know what they're doing and do it anyway. Now, that's not ADHD, that's something else. In fact, the word I might use to describe that is a word we don't use anymore. You know what it is? Naughty. Now, naughty, what naughty means is you think about it, then you do it anyway. Does that make sense, really? Whereas non-premeditated is this. That's why impulsivity. Now, there is some overlap, obviously, and what you do about it is going to be crucial, and there will be different rhythms of how you do things. But the impulsivity is what I want to focus on a little bit more maybe than the hyperactivity, because I think that's the one that is really important. There's a picture of a child with ADHD, by the way. I thought I'd produce one for you. Is that working? Is that working? See, he or she's not there when they should be, and even if they are there, do you really have them? That's the issue. Do you really have them? So it's not just the hyperactivity, it's the hypoactivity, the ones who are drifting away, which is why you do have to make sure that you have a little bit of movement always taking place to make sure you have people back. And we're going to do that in a minute. The assessment process is quite complex. It should, in my view, be thorough. It should be, looking at all the things that might be eliminating the other things that might be causing or looking at these symptoms. And ours, as I said before, was pretty comprehensive, where we're looking at rating scales. We're looking at the child. We're doing some tests for attention span and vigilance. We're looking at the history, what's been done, what's not been done. For people who are skeptical, then obviously we do need to show them some of the neurology. And there is some neurology that you can show for some people who are still very much skeptical that ADHD is real and not a made-up term. And this is someone who has neurotypical features and someone here who has the traits. Now, this isn't always done, of course, but for some people who need to have that proof, if you like, really, it's something they need. If people think that's something the parents haven't done, their attitude towards kids can be very different from something that they think is in the child. Does that make sense, really? Their attitude can be very different. And because I've got you now for another half an hour or so, I also need to know how to deliver the rest of this talk, because you've been sitting for a long period of time in a room. So I thought... Sorry, yeah, okay, yeah. Okay, 15 minutes, okay. But we'll keep to the schedule as much as we can. But anyway, I thought I'd do a little test here to see how I could deliver the rest of the presentation to you. So I thought we'd do a little test to see where you were on the attention deficit spectrum. Okay, really? It's a very simple test. Do you like to look at this? So first of all, it's called the Stroop test. It's a very simple test. Some of you are nodding. You've already done it before. So what I'd like to do, the colour and the word are the same. So all you've got to do is read left to right. So it's red, green, blue, yellow, pink, orange, blue, green, blue, white. Okay? What you've got to do is read the colour and the word are the same. On the count of 3, and I'm going to scan you. I want you to go all the way, that way, that way, that way, that way, and that way. And I'm going to scan you to see where you are on the ADHD spectrum. Okay? On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go. Red.
Green, blue, yellow, pink, orange, blue, green, blue, white, green, yellow, orange, blue, white, brown, red, blue, yellow, green, pink, yellow, green, blue, red.
I love your accents, by the way. Can I say that? Really gorgeous accents. Right. Now I want you to do it again. Now this time, a little bit more difficult. This time I want you to tell me what the colour is, not what it says. So that's green, yellow, white, pink, orange, blue, red, yellow. The colour, not the word. The colour, not the word. On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, go.
Green, yellow, white, pink, red, blue,
Okay, be honest. Who's going to need one of these to get through the next half an hour? Okay, come on. Who didn't get off the second line? There's a lady, there's a person down at the back there who's being honest. Okay, you need one of these. I've only got one, so this lady here, you get to do that. We'll come back to these later, by the way. So, be honest. So here's what we're saying, isn't it? And this is the other thing. We are all, as was said before, on a spectrum. What's happening there, of course, it's just showing you, of course, that, you know, what you can do for a lot of the time is do something you take for granted. You can suppress your impulses. You can, in other words, hesitate. You want to read the word. I asked you to give me the colour. You could do it for a bit, but after a while, it broke down. That's because you have stuff that allows you to do that. If that's not happening, that is why you do what you do. Does that make sense, really? It's not proof, it's just showing you that we are all on spectrums and some people have less opportunity to do tasks than others. And even if you were teaching a whole group of students in a school, even if, do never ever assume they're all listening to you exactly the same way. Does that make sense, really? Because it won't be true. The responsibility for doing this or not doing this is up in that area there. It's up in the central control area we call our frontal lobe, and that's the area that is not working in the correct or in the developmentally, I suppose, organised way along with their peers. So, and there's a lot more science, a lot more slides I could have shown you on this. If you do want more slides, science on this area, you'll have my email on the front of the presentation. You can contact me or I can send it to you to send on. What I want to talk about, though, is the reality of this. And when you have people who have these traits, they will stand out. And because they will stand out, we need to adapt what we do in order to support them, in the same way that you showed with the idea on. And I used to use those for years, these things, bands, because we know that. See, the irony is that when they're younger, you get this. You let them move. As they get older, of course, they're told, don't move, sit still, and look at me. And by the way, whoever said that eye contact was absolutely vital for listening to people? Does that make sense? Some people listen well when they're looking, but if everything else is coming in, interfering with you, and you want to listen to somebody, why wouldn't you do that and look down where there was less distraction and listen to someone, because you would have less things to distract you? Does that make sense, really? But we have this thing about, look at me, I'm speaking to you. Now, for most people, that's quite useful, but for other people who are finding that person over there moving or that person over there is pulling them away, why wouldn't you therefore listen more actively by looking down? But we don't think that way. Everyone says, look at me, I'm speaking to you. You know, and this happens in secondary schools a lot. So Jack, this is secondary school, not you guys get the fiddling, because you understand fiddling is important. Fiddling, and you understand that, because the early years teachers get that. It's older teachers that have fiddling is a crime against humanity. And what happens is that, say a 13-year-old, he's asked to leave the room because he's annoyed the teacher. So what happens is this. And he's got the traits. He's standing outside the classroom, okay, like this, and he's stressed. The teacher's probably a bit stressed too. And he's still saying he'll work with you, because if he doesn't want to work with you, he'd have run away. Does that make sense, really? So he still wants to work with you. So he's there, and he's doing this. And the secondary school teacher will say, stop fiddling and look at me. Well, when he's fiddling, he's doing this, he's stressed. This actually is de-stressing him. It's making him feel less agitated. If he's not got it, he's probably going to move a bit more. That will make the teacher think that he or she is not taking it seriously. If they have ADHD, you make them look at you, then they might look at you for a bit and then they might follow something else. That makes the supervisor more angry because they think you're not taking it seriously. If they've got some ASD traits as well, they look at you and you look quite funny when you look angry, or they notice a spot on your nose and they start grinning at you. If you're grinning at someone and they're telling you off, now you want to kill them. Does that make sense, really? So here's my point. If you've got a child, working with a child, when they're stressed, and if they're doing this, don't always say to them, stop fiddling and look at me. You might find you get a better response by doing the opposite to what you may have done before. Now, maybe you get that. In early years, I think you understand fiddling because many of you work, obviously, with boys and girls, and you know that if you don't let young boys fiddle with something, it's amazing what some boys will find. So therefore, you, generally speaking, are a lot more proactive. But as they get up into the school system, fiddling is a crime. And it's really not. It's helping people focus. Does that make sense, really? But it's something that you'll go on your own journey on. What I was going to say, though, I'll give you an example. Shouting out in class. It might be a bit older for you, but so I had a student, because what happens is, what we tend to do still is, if you know the answer to this question, put your hand up, you say, put your hand up, and most people put their hands up, and the person with ADHD won't wait their turn. What will they do? They'll shout out the answer. Now, why do they shout out the answer? Well, for lots of reasons. Number one, if they don't, if they want to be first. 2, they're impulsive. 3, if they don't tell you it straight away, they'll forget it. Does that make sense, really? So I had a student some years ago who did this. He shouted out, did all this, did all that, and nothing I did worked for him. He would shout out, and I tried taking I tried, letting him wait his turn. I tried a whiteboard for the kids who were going to put their hands up. He still shouted out. So one day I saw him doodling. I used to let him doodle on a Post-it note. Now, he shouldn't have had these Post-it notes. I gave him a paper to doodle on, but he shouldn't have had one of these. And I had an idea. Now, he was a 7 or 8-year-old, and I said to him, Daniel, I said, instead of shouting out, what I want you to do is, I'm going to give you 10 of these Post-it notes. When you've got the answer to a question, I want you to put the answer on the Post-it note, the time on it, or do a drawing, and then, because he was moving wiggly, when you've done 10 of them, I want you to put them on my table. Now, what I wanted him to do was stop shouting out, but I also wanted him to know, I wanted to know what he knew. Does that make sense, really? And a seat break, an organised seat break, okay? So it was just a bit of understanding about why he was doing it that helped me come up with this strategy. Now, it didn't work all the time because then he started sticking on people's back saying, kick me and hit me and things like that, really. So your strategies will not work perfectly, but the more you try and invent things, the better it will be. The thing that I am going to say, which is hard to justify, and it's hard to explain, because people will say, children with ADHD, they can do it when they want to. Now, they say that because they've seen them do a task for a period of time. They've seen them on Fortnite or on some kind of computer game sit and listen. And then they say it's on their terms. It's not quite as easy as that. And I could put this down. I can't really, there's no scientific evidence to explain this, but I'm going to say this anyway. They've just got a low threshold of boredom. That's the bottom line. But when they're stimulated by what they're doing and who they're doing it with, they're on the money. It actually is actually quite environmentally conditioned, because sometimes you'll see them completely focused, and other times when sitting and trying, not. So it is to do with they need stimulation. And some of you need stimulation, because again, we've got whatever we've got, 30, 40 minutes, whatever. You need movement. Because sitting like this for long periods of time, it's hard to carry on listening. Zoltan, my friend, if you'd like to come up here a minute. So we're going to get you to do some movement because I'm going to give you some ideas about what to do. I also want to help you to understand how strategies actually work. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. Now, Zoltan, it's a very simple game. You put your hands behind your back. Right, what we're going to do, when I say draw, you're going to put your hands up with some fingers on display, any number of fingers. Is that okay? So, draw. Right, the winner is the first person to shout out how many fingers or thumbs are on display. So you've got 2, I've got 2. The answer is 4, but it's 4. 2 and 2 is 4. You put your hands up. Put your hands up. Say draw. Okay, so that's 4. Again, you've got 4, I've got none. The answer is 4, okay? So it's the first person to shout out that wins the round. You're each going to say draw in turn, draw, then you shout, I say draw, you say draw, I say draw, you say draw, I say draw. Best of 6, the first person to shout out wins the round. Okay, we're done. So thank you for that. If you go back, so I want you to play in groups of 2, quick on the draw. Play with a partner, first person to shout out wins the round. Okay, off you go. Play with a partner, quick on the draw. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Now, we've got lots more movement taking place today. So, right, now, can someone tell me who won? Can someone tell me who won? Who beat their partner? Is anyone going to tell me? Who beat their partner? Who won? Who won more draws than the other? Anybody want to say? She did. Okay, you did. Miss, how did you win? Can you tell us how you won? In English? No? Can you tell us how you won? Because what happened is, can I say this, what people do work out that game early on, because what happens is people, see, I played it before, so you had the first time you played it, so I was quicker because I played it before, because what I knew, because I played it before, you see, I don't, because when you watch people play it the first time, you say draw, they do this, they go draw, they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14. And then, after 2 or 3 rounds, they swagger up with a sort of like, I've got this. And they do this. 7. Because what they've done is, they've known how many they're going to put up and just count theirs. And some people get really strategic. They start doing this, like that. So you can't read it. See, strategies don't come from the first time you do something with somebody. They don't always come the second time. But the 3rd or 4th time you do stuff, you'll start thinking, how can I make this work for me? Does that make sense, really? So it's not inspiration, it is perspiration. The more you do it, the more likely you are to achieve the end point. Does that make sense, really? You can't get a strategy off a slide. You can get it by you adjusting it with people. I was at a course recently about de-escalation of aggression. And this chap was saying that, Tanya, if you're about to explode, I shouldn't go in with my full body armor on. I should go in at the side and make myself look smaller. Now, that is important, not to be doing all this, because that doesn't help anybody. But if I do this to you, hello. It's just kind of creepy, isn't it, really? It just doesn't work for me. And you do that anyway, the kids will turn around and say, you've been on a course. So if it doesn't feel right, it won't come over right. Does that make sense, really? You've got to feel like you want to do it and it's true to you. So that thing about strategies is we're going to give you some today and give you some ideas, but it's how you do it, not what you do. It's how you do it. So issue with girls, we want to make sure we don't forget the girls, not just the ones with ADD, I've mentioned them, but the ones with ADHD too, because they still do get treated differently. I think one of the things for the boys, I think, that seemingly does give them some more traction is because of the reading element. I know at home, at least, the boys, have problems at reading. The girls are okay at reading, but they've got other issues. And for girls, it's the socialization issues that are really crucial. Unless we identify some of the needs that they may have when they're younger, you're just setting them up to fail when they're teenagers, because those social relationships that teenagers between girls are so complex. And if some girls developmentally are not at the same stage as their peers, that will cause a problem. So that is why early intervention. But ADHD is true enough, is not just and by the way, we're not just talking about children. I know we talk about children, but it's also people. And we want to make that point. It doesn't just fall off you at 15 or 16. Hopefully you've learned to adapt and developmentally you're catching up, but you will have traits throughout your life. I'm trying to think of somebody who you might know as an adult, because we used to think of it as being a child. It's also adults. Do you ever watch, is it the show Friends? The television show, the American show Friends? Anyone ever seen that, the show Friends? There was a character in there called Phoebe. Have you ever seen that character? She has those sorts of traits, and you know, she's an adult, but she has those kind of bit quirky, if that's the word, I can't really translate quirky, is it? No, but off cuff. So anyway, and Monica, if you watch that show, she's got a lot of the obsessional stuff, and Rachel, Jennifer Aniston, is perfect in every single way, really. Should really say that, really, but she's kind of my favourite, really, just when you say that. Okay, so girls as well. So overlap, it is the norm, it's not the exception. And for those people who will work in this field will know that we do get people who have more, if you like, we wouldn't call it pure, but that would be more defined attention deficit. Often it overlaps with specific learning difficulties, and that's your dyslexia for reading, dyscalculia for maths, dyspraxia for or developmental coordination disorder for movements. You've also got dysphasia for speech, haven't you? And you've got dysgraphia for writing. There's a lot of duzes out there, really. There's a lot of overlap. ASD, overlap is huge, I think, really. More often than not, there's overlap of both. Oppositional defiant disorder, those are the ones that really will argue. Sometimes we have a term, if you go down the ADHD route, we talk about oppositional defiant disorder. You go down the ASD route, we talk about pathological demand avoidance. They're both quite tricky. If, by the way, you come across someone with oppositional defiant disorder, there is a career pathway for them. They are the defence lawyers of the future, or Ryanair cabin crew. Everyone's got a role, really. I don't know where Ryanair works here, really. But anyway, everyone's got a role, really. Now, a term that we don't talk about much is conduct disorder. Conduct disorder is different. And if we are going to talk about impulsive, non-premeditated behaviour, we need at least to address the fact there are some young people who have more premeditated behaviour. What causes that is, it's almost certainly issues to do with attachment, obviously poor kind of structures at home, but there is a difference. It's a difference, and it's a more premeditated approach towards things. And I think if we're going to really take behaviour on board and look at it in a way we are doing it, we need to look at some of the other terms which might not be as, you know, as not as nice, I'm trying to say, as comfortable. I think that would be a word to look at. But we're starting to look at conduct disorder now as a different response, and make a different response. Because for conduct disorder, you really do have to change, I think, a lot of things in terms of lifestyle, role models, that type of element of things. So it is something that I think it's important for us to look at it at squaring the circle, if that makes sense. In terms of what we're doing, I know that at this time of day that you will be struggling for a bit. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to be about this. Because I saw a boy recently in school who was excluded because what happened was he was a 7-year-old boy, and what happened was he threw a chair at the teacher, which isn't good. And then he got sent to the head teacher, and because he was so stressed from the other thing, he told the head teacher to go and he used some bad language, very bad language, and he was excluded. And that. But what happened was up to there. It was because I was sitting in the class, and this boy had ADHD traits, and he did pretty well in the morning, but in the afternoon he was really fidgeting. He was really sort of moving around a lot. And what happened was he said, "Sir, there's a cat in the playground." And the teacher said, "Don't look at the cat, look at me." So he reluctantly looked back. The other kids were sort of interested. And then 2 minutes later, he stopped and said, "Sir, he's got a red collar on." Now the teacher said, "Look, I've told you before to sit down, stop looking out the window and listen to me." And he looked a bit like that. Anyway, 2 minutes later, he's on his seat saying, "Sir, he's got a bell on it." Now, at this point, all the other kids were interested too. They all went over to the window. The teacher had a real go at everybody, had a real go at this boy who was called Jack. And he said to Jack, he said, you've caused all this mayhem, this commotion. You're always doing this. You're always interrupting my lessons. And he shouted at Jack. And Jack was probably quite used to being shouted at because, and this is the thing about shouting. It doesn't work for people who get it all the time because it's just noise. So Jack shouted back at him, and the teacher shouted back at him, and it went up, and Jack threw a chair, and he got excluded. So I was asked, because I was sitting in the room, what we should have done, or what he should have done. And this is what I said, whether you agree or not. I just said that in a class of 7 or 8-year-olds, especially with Jack, you can't compete with a cat in the playground. It doesn't matter what you're doing or talking about. If they see a cat in the playground, it's like a spaceship has come out of the sky and landed in the playground. We've all seen cats. We've all seen, but if you see one out of context and you've got ADHD, well, it's the biggest thing ever. You know what? So it's like a wasp in the classroom. You can ignore it, but it's still there. Does that make sense, really? So he said, well, what should we have done? And I said, well, if it's there, instead of having the whole class, everyone gets up, goes over to the window, looks out the window. If a cat sees 30 pairs of eyes looking at it, it's going to either run away or start cleaning itself, and people get bored and they'll come back, and then you can carry on. And he said, but they'll all be up about cats and dogs. I said, well, they were all up because you threw a chair across the room, and therefore we've got this now. He said, it's the waste of time. He said, what about the waste of learning? The waste of time when you got the chair, it was like, and they said, they'll be up as well. If that happens, then you sit them down, then you say, we've got 2 minutes to talk about who's got a cat, who's got a dog. Do that, and then move on. It's not a waste of time, it's an investment of time. Does that make sense, really? So right now, break from me. See, differentiation isn't just about worksheets or model. It's about doing stuff which works for people in situations. So with a person beside you right now, have a chat. Who's got a dog, who's got a cat? Go on, have a chat beside you. Who's got a dog, who's got a cat? Anybody? Go on, have a little chat. Anyone got a dog or cat? Go on. Dog or cat? Show pictures if you want to of your dogs and your cats. No? Not really working? Not really working? My point being, you can take a break every now and again in order to move on, okay? Right, we have a formula for you. It is not a magic formula, but it is an approach in order to actually maybe get some things through. We call it SF3R. S stands for structure. And really what we need to understand that we are going to have non-traditional learners in our system. We also need to have some training. Now, training is not necessarily telling you what to do. It's showing you that what you do might need to be done in a slightly different way. Could I have that Tangle toy back a minute, just because I know you want it? These are called Tangle toys. I know people say we can't give them a toy, so I made this up. No, it's not a toy, I said. You know what we call it in England? I made this up. I called it a concentrator. And people go, ooh, a concentrator. I just made it up because it's like, oh, we can't give them a toy. It's not a toy, it's a concentrator. Anyway, the point is, but you give them to people and then they'll say, I'm sorry, what's your name again? Judith. Judith. So you'll give it to Kate. Now, Kate has been needing this for a while because Kate's been doing this with her leg. You can't see it down the front here, really, but she's moving. And I haven't said stop moving your leg, have I, really? But if you had someone who was younger and Kate, so you give this to Kate, and Kate's using this for a couple of days. But then on the second day, what happens is that Kate whacks Judith on the arm with it. Off you whack her on the arm with it. Go on. Okay, so you hit her on the arm with it. So what do people do? They say, give that back to me. It's a lethal weapon. And you'll say, was it working for Kate? Was Kate more engaged? And but she hit Judith on the arm with it. Right, well, go on. Hit Judith again with that pen. Go on, hit her on the arm with that pen. Right, you've done the same thing. You've hit someone with an object. This happens to be a pen. Do people take the pen away? Unlikely. Why? Well, because she needs her pen. If they need something, they need it. If you take it away the first time they misuse it, don't give it to them at all. If you whack her with your glasses, I'm not having any more hitting people, I'm not taking your glasses away, there will be a response to what you've done. Does that make sense, really? But training isn't telling people, it's getting people to understand if they need something, they need it. If they misuse it all the time, I get it. The other thing is all the other kids will want one. Truth is, the first day they all do. The second day, few of them do. The third day, they've got used to it. You know why? Because he's not bothering them as much as they did before. Does that make sense, really? So training isn't telling people what to do. It's getting to understand that if someone needs something, they need it. It's not theirs, it's yours. If they misuse it, you take it back, but you're not going to ever give it back to them ever again. Does that make sense, really? So you can have that instead of using your feet. So structure. Now, the second word there, which seems to be contradictory to structure, is flexibility. And flexibility is not. It's complementary. See, there are some things that are non-negotiable, and I imagine it's got to be health and safety-wise. There's no biting, there's no hitting. Doesn't matter if you're ADHD, ODD, BBC, MTV, it doesn't matter. Some things are red lines, and you have to establish that, because if you don't, they'll never get any kind of traction at all. But calling out, fiddling, these are not crimes against the state. Does that make sense, really? So F is flexibility. Now, I've got, you're working towards inclusion here. I heard the stats early on. So I have an inclusion slide for you. You want to see my inclusion slide? Oh, no, it's not. I haven't got it now. So there it is. That's my inclusion. I wouldn't think it would work, really. So what I was going to say, it's the second one. What I was going to say is that when you're doing your structure, you do also need to be what I'd call a bit of a benign dictator. Does that make sense, really? You see, you can't always want to be liked. You need to be understood that you have some non-negotiables. Does that make sense, really? Now, you can be friendly, you can be loving, but you also need, every now and again, to do something here. So this is see, that's a lovely picture, isn't it? See that polar bear? See how loving the polar bear is to the little baby bear? What's the polar bear also got? He's got claws. And they've got teeth. So every now and again, you have to establish those boundaries. And when I work with parents sometimes, when the kids are getting into sort of like to that kind of 7, 8, 9-year-old period, and they're starting to really force the parents into stuff, we talk about the red lines. And we don't talk about no shouting, no fighting. You can't do that straight away. What you can talk about are no food upstairs, shoes up in the house. Set those non-negotiables. You start off with your rituals, your routines. Bedtime at 8 o'clock is bedtime at 8 o'clock. It's not 10 past 8. You know, tea time is at this time. Bath time is at that time. You need to, and that needs to be done. There's only a certain amount of screen time, that time every day, maybe more on the weekends. But you can't be, oh, because it's too busy. If you start doing that, then you will not get them back. So it's about having your rules and rituals. But you also have to be sometimes able not to be, I suppose, able to not be liked sometimes, really. It's important that you get those red lines and establish them on a regular basis, or else, and for children that fight structure, they need it the most. Does that make sense, really? So we've got to have that. Flexibility is all about alternative ways. I don't talk a lot about behavior management. I talk about mood management. And I think, again, the early years people, and I call you early years because that's what we say in the UK, that people, you guys are very good at behavior management when they're younger, because I think you understand the power of distraction. I think when they're older, we start negotiating with them. See, so I saw a mother come out of McDonald's the other day with a 2-year-old, and the 2-year-old fell on the ground, looked at her knee, and then started crying, started going, ah! Now the mother, because it was starting to bleed, the mother didn't go up to the 2-year-old and say, look, please stop crying. The fibrin glands will all come together, catch the red blood cells. The white blood cells will come in, starve off infection. She said to her, oh, she said, there's a balloon over there. He went, ah, oh. I just thought, beautiful piece of distraction. What it is it's basically mood management. That's what that is, really. Now, I'm not saying you say to a 17-year-old, there's a balloon over there, but the same aspect is true. You think about mood as opposed to behavior, changing the mood. What changes mood? The most important mood in all of this, though, will be yours. If you're in a good mood, you do things well. See, I work with parents sometimes, and parents will say, Kate, why you can't have your computer the rest of the week? It's Monday. Now, you really don't want to say that on a Monday, because you say that on a Monday, you've got Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and you've got to keep to it. It is not the severity of what you do, it is the certainty. So if you say it, you must follow through. So if you're impulsive when you say stuff, that is not going to help things. I was on a plane on the way over, and they always do that stuff about, doing things. When they talk to you about the stuff coming down, the breathing apparatus coming down, and you might have your child here and the other child there, who's the pilot that says it goes on first? It goes on you. Because when you're breathing properly, you can sort them out. Does that make sense, really? So in all of this, it's going to be not so much about, we talk about more about mood, and that gets more important as they get older. I think as you're younger, you kind of do that anyway. I wish some of my colleagues, when they're older, had some of your skills and techniques, because distraction is one of your best devices in terms of changing someone's situation. When it comes to the 3 R's, it isn't just what you do, it's how you do it. So I've got rapport up there. Rapport is gaining their trust. Relationships, SEN, by the way, is special educational needs. And resilience is when you take the stabilizers off. So it's not really a formula, it's more of a process. And really, the process is such that it isn't, they're kind of cogs in a wheel. So let's give you some ideas. Why is structure vital? Well, the reason why structure is vital is because it reduces anxiety. You might be a bit stressed, or might be a bit bored, or you might be a bit uncomfortable, but you know you've got 14 minutes left until lunch. So because of that, you're kind of like, whoa, we're near the end. So it makes you feel less stressed. Everyone likes structure. They need structure. But structure is about consistency, and it is about routines and rituals and doing them even when it's hard for us to do it. You need to do it. Does that make sense, really? Or else you won't. I think sometimes as well, you will have to sort of see situations for what they are. And that's where I think flexibility comes into it. So can I tell you a story about the boys when they were younger, right? The boys when they were 3. Brennan, who's the kind of he's quite easy. Connor, not so easy. Connor comes up to me once and said, Daddy, he said, Brennan bit my toe. It's a bit unusual that, right? He says he bit my toe. So I said to Brennan, did you bite Connor's toe? He said, no. Well, Connor said you did. Well, I didn't. So I don't know. I'm looking at both of them to see who was telling the truth. And so it was a hot day. He wants to go upstairs and play in the pool, paddling pool. And I said, right, well, you've got to go upstairs. You're in your room. You're basically you're grounded type thing, or you're upstairs in your room. You can't go and play in the paddling pool until I find out what happened. So they go upstairs. Then they come down 2 minutes later. Connor, did Brennan bite your toe? Yes, he said. Brennan, did you bite Connor's toe? No, he said. Well, no one's caving. So back you go upstairs. You could hear them boom, bash, bash, around. Anyway, they came downstairs about 5 minutes later. They want to go out. Well, you can't. Not. I said, Connor, 3rd time, did Brennan bite your toe? Yes, he said. I'm still not sure, because and I said, Brennan, did you bite Connor's toe? No, he said. But, he said, when we were fighting, Connor's toe got into my mouth. So now he's just kind of like giving me, he's not going to tell me he's done it, but he's telling me he's done it. Does that make sense, really? But he's not going to say the words. That's flexibility. So what happens is Connor goes out, Brennan goes upstairs for a couple of minutes or 5 minutes because he's done this. And he goes up, he's okay, I'm okay, we've all got a deal. Does that make sense, really? That's flexibility. Now, if it was more serious than that, that would be instruction. That's what we're saying. A lot of slides up here. I'm not going to go through all of them, really. This would be to do with schools and things like that. I think you, as teachers, need to be mobile meerkats. Does that make sense, really? And nature gave you 1 of these. It gave you 2 of these, 2 of these, and 2 of these. And they were saying to work the room because you don't know what little See, you got little players in every classroom, you know that? You got players. I go in to watch a certain student. Who do I come back reporting on? 2 or 3 others. You know what they're doing is they're winding him or her up. And you don't see that because they're subtle and they're premeditated as well. And so it's something to do. You've got to work the room. Just an example of something you get into. So this is a very old slide. This would be for older students. But here's an example of. So we gave a student. See this slide here now? It might look like it's busy, it's got stuff on it, it's too crowded. We gave a child years ago a page of maths or sums, and there was 20 questions on a page with ADHD traits. And he pushed it away. He said, I can't do it. And a teaching assistant, which are our assistant teachers, she came along and she got a divider, and what she did was she cut a little hole in the divider and she put it on top of the thing. And he went, oh, down the page. What she did was she took away the noise, the distractions of the other questions. Does that make sense, really? Too much, they can't live. One thing at a time, they can do. When you start thinking about where they're coming from, your strategies come. Does that make sense, really? Strategies come from working with, not looking at a slide. That's the idea. The rest of this stuff I kind of mentioned. I think what we need to do sometimes is put a picture up just to sort of like throw you so I get you back. This last section really is just mentioning about medication very quickly. I know medication is not our first point of response, but if you've got a child who is going to run out in front of traffic, jump over buildings, going to endanger their life, and maybe that of other people, with the best will in the world, a sticker chart might not be enough. Now, I love stickers. I love rewards. I love all those things. If you've got someone whose impulsivity and hyperactivity are so extreme, then it's important at least to consider the option of medication when you've tried the other things first. So I'm not saying it's the first place, but I'm saying keep the door ajar, particularly when they become more independent, because it might be something to help. Medication doesn't cure them. The people who help them are you. If you couldn't play the piano before you took medication, you won't be able to play the piano afterwards. But it might help someone teach you how to play the piano. Does that make sense, really? It allows them to hesitate longer so you can help them to make a different choice. That would be my response on that one. Those would be some of the things it might do. It treats core symptoms, but it allows the other things to work maybe more efficiently or in a different way. Last thing I want to say is about communication. It's more about rapport. It isn't what you say, it's how you say it. So words only say so much. Communication is mostly about the non-verbal stuff. Do you want a picture to prove this? A picture to prove this? I think you'll like this, Tanya. There. How's that going? How is that going? Not so well, is there, really? So it isn't what you say, it's how you say it. So active listening is important, actually, and listening, not listening to reply, listening to understand. You know, I'm a talker, I'm a poor listener. I've learned over the years that I've made things worse by not listening properly, not listening to reply, listening to understand. And it's a myth that the greatest salespeople are talkers. That's a myth. The greatest salespeople, and that's what you're doing, you're selling, are listeners. So what does the client want? What does the client need? What is their world like? How does it feel for them? Not how does it feel for you, how does it feel for them? Words are useful. I need you to is what I use a lot. Not can you, will you. I need you to. It's coming from you and them. If you've got a good relationship with them, that might help. I need you to. Try and avoid, sometimes if you're not in the right place, don't do it then. Because you'll say things that you don't mean and you can't back up or don't want to back up. Does that make sense, really? If it's not life-threatening, sometimes walk away, catch yourself, come back, and then deliver whatever it is you want to say or do. Does that make sense? Sometimes things on the left-hand side you can change by doing something on the right-hand side. So instead of saying, please be quiet, can't you see I'm talking? You can say instead, please don't interrupt. How many times do I have to tell you? Why don't you say, please listen carefully? You can always say things in a more positive way, can't you? If you have that mindset. You can say things, you're always getting into trouble. Do you need me to help you with this? What's going to be more responsive to the child, the left-hand side or the right-hand side? I think you might find the right-hand side, you get a better long-term response. And more of these things which we could go through, have we the time. Avoid those things, shouting. It usually doesn't help the situation. It makes the situation more rarefied. You might think it makes you feel better. It, generally speaking, doesn't improve things. Keep your voice, at a certain tempo, certain level, but shouting, generally speaking, means you've kind of lost control. And it doesn't work for kids particularly. It works for some kids, I get that, but for these kids, it makes it, and also it's power for them. If they can get a 6 foot tall, a 1 meter 8 person hopping around, some kids think, this is pretty cool, I've got this. And if they think they've got you, then why wouldn't they do it again? Because it's kind of, they don't think conceptually that way, but it's what they're in control. I watch it all the time. The adult, kids just like, who's running the show here, really? So it's about diffusing, not infusing. In general, it's about mood. I think it's all about mood management. I've said that before. It's about reading the mood, reading the expression, feeling the climate. So because I think it's about mood, I've got a little game for you. Now, what I want you to do, in groups of 2, I want one of you to exhibit 3 out of these 7 facial expressions to the person beside them, okay? So on the count, so what I want you to do is one of you is going to exhibit 3 of these facial expressions to the person beside them, and the person is going to guess what mood you are exhibiting. Off you go in groups of 2. One of you, in groups of 2, one of you is going to exhibit 3 out of these facial expressions, and the other person is going to guess what expression you're exhibiting. Off you go in groups of 2. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Listen, we need to finish because we're going to... I'm not going through the rest of these slides because we're going to go to lunch. What I am going to say is sometimes we do need to watch out for certain expressions. Now, anger is something which is real. You see, the thing about anger, it's real. And if someone is angry, they're angry. Saying don't be angry is not useful. It's like saying don't be happy. It's a real feeling. If you tell someone who's angry not to be angry, it's going to make them more angry. Does that make sense? You've got to understand, first of all, they're angry. You might not agree with it, but it's a real feeling. Or else, if you start not getting it, it turns into rage. And when you've got rage, you've got a problem, okay? So that's the first thing about it. It's a real feeling. You sometimes get warning signs. That's why I talk about reading mood. You've got to, take the temperature. You've got to read where it's coming from and who's involved. You sometimes get, particularly if they have autistic-y type traits, you can sometimes see it seething. You can see it coming. Sometimes you can't. What do? Diversion, distraction. Still one of your best techniques. Distraction. Find a cat. Do something that's different. I use distraction all the time, at any level. I use it when they're younger, I use it when they're older. It's still my best first technique before you move into other stuff. It diminishes things before you move into other stuff. And rebuilding it after it's happened, use the opportunity to have that conversation about what led up to it. But if they understand, if they see you looking at them and not what they're doing, then, you get that relationship building up. Last point I want to say about praise is it's really important to praise. We all think we praise well, but the considered view is that, particularly if you've got children that have on spectrum as well, don't praise them, praise what they've done. Praise the achievement, not the person. Does that make sense? It's okay to praise the person every now and again. Higher form of praise is praise the achievement, the effort, not so much the person. Does that make sense? That's the considered view on that. Working with parents, really important that you keep that relationship with parents. And if you're working with a child, you're also working with a family. It's about regular contact, communication. And the same skills you have when working with the children, listening, those kind of things you would use them with the parents too, because they'll be just bigger versions of their children. And it's the same thing, it's the same people skills. So the last thing I want to say is listen to people. I like this from Sean Mistel. We like and respect. We like and respect people who identify with us, and we pay attention who mean what they say. It's not what you say, it is very much how you say it. And there's the ducks. Remember our ducks? We're trying to get all our ducks up into secondary school and secondary school up into adulthood. That's where they're going. It's the whole SEN spectrum on a slide. You see the one with ADHD there? See it? There you go. That one with ADHD. It's my spot on the snow. I'm second in line. And this one here is my favourite. You know what this is? Oppositional defiant disorder. I'm not standing in that line, and you can't make me. We started off by saying, I've got these slides for you, which might be a bit busy, so I will read these for you, because we are talking about children, not ADHD children, but let's be more specific about it. We're talking about girls and boys, all right? Or men and women, if you were talking about older people, who have differences. And I think boys and girls are really a little different sometimes, different rhythms sometimes. So I've got something I got from a school notice board. This is about girls. This is girls. So the great truths that girls have learned, no matter how hard you try, you can't baptize cats. When your mum is mad at dad, don't let her brush your hair. Does that work? Does that work, really? If your sister hits you, don't hit her back. They always catch the second person. Never ask your 4-year-old brother to hold a tomato. You can't trust dogs to watch your food. All good stuff. Don't sneeze when someone's cutting your hair. Never hold a dustbuster and a cat at the same time. You can't hide a piece of broccoli in a glass of milk. Don't wear polka dot underwear under white shorts. And the best place when you're sad is Grandpa's lap. Boys. A 3-year-old boy's voice is louder than 200 adults in a crowded restaurant. How has something so small yet be so powerful, really? When you hear the toilet flush and the words aha, it's too late. Brake fluid mixed with bleach makes smoke and lots of it. Certain Legos will pass through the digestive tract of a 4-year-old boy. Garbage bags do not make good parachutes. Super glue is forever. Marbles in petrol tanks make lots of noise when driving. The spin cycle on a washing machine does not make earthworms dizzy. It does make cats dizzy. Cats throw up twice of their body weight when dizzy. Now, this is interesting for you and for the guys over here in the AV group and the other guys in the room, of which there aren't many. But this is important, and you guys are translators as well, done a fantastic job, by the way. 80% of women, this is allegedly a report, who read this will pass this on to almost all of their friends with or without children. 80% of men who read this, the AV group, Zoltan, will go home tonight and try mixing bleach and brake fluid. So if they disappear out into the garage, we know that's where they are, okay? All right, you've listened to me all day. Last slide for you. This is one of my favorite slides, so I want to show you this. Look, I made this point before. There is no such thing, in my view, as ADHD children. There's just children who have traits. What we want to do, behavior is a message. We've got to understand the message they're telling us, look behind it, look at the child who's delivering the message, let them see us looking at them. If they see us looking at them, they let us in. They let us in, then they'll let us guide them and help them. So can you see the child? You see a couple here looking over a lake. Look at it a bit longer, and what will you see? I'll help you with my... There's the feet. There's the back. There's the head. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely lunch and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.